Okay, so chapter 7, part 1.
In this video, I'll be going over the difference between a killing, a homicide, manslaughter, and murder, and more. First, I'll be going over a short story that's 2 minutes, and then I'm going to break down the explanation of what crime did each of the events fall into. One evening, Jason the Jerk was watching the season finale of House of Walking Thrones. He then called his friend, Rosie, who he knew had not seen it yet, and gave her the ending of the story. House of the Walking Thrones was Rosie's life, and she began immediately plotting the downfall of Jason. Rosie then purchased a gun and began observing Jason's schedule to see when he left work every morning. 2 weeks later, she was finally ready to go through with it. While walking to her car early in the morning, Bert the burglar jumped out of a bush in her front yard and said, "I'm gonna shoot you and take all the stuff in your house." Rosie then pulled out her gun and shot Bert in the head. While leaving her residential neighborhood going 20 miles over the speed limit, she struck the jaywalking Donnie the drunk, killing him instantly. There was slightly more traffic than usual that morning, and Rosie decided she was going to drive on the sidewalk. She reasoned pedestrians would be quick enough to jump out of the way. Archibald, who was walking his pet cat that morning, however, was too deep in thought to notice her car speeding down the sidewalk at 90 miles per hour. Rosie finally arrived at Jason's house, where she waited at the front porch for 20 minutes until he was finally ready to leave to work. He opened the front door, and she had shot him in the head. While looking for a police station to turn herself in, Lenny the linguist was walking her way. Rosie asked him, "Where police station?" He replied, "Oh, you mean where is the police station?" She was not in the mood to have her grammar corrected, and shot him in the head. The police station was finally within sight. Broke Bill, who had recently been paroled, grabbed her arm and said, "Hey lady, give me money for the bus." She was frightened by the large man who had just assaulted her, and I bet you could guess what happened next. Now we will go over what crimes were most likely committed during Rosie's rampage when she killed each of these 6 persons. The first distinction we will make is that of homicide and killing. Homicide is simply an unlawful killing. In the case of Bert the burglar, Rosie lawfully killed a trespasser who was threatening her life. This is not a homicide. Homicide has 2 major categories: murder and manslaughter, which is typically broken down into 2 categories: voluntary and involuntary manslaughter. When Rosie ran over Donnie the drunk while speeding, this is a classical example of vehicular manslaughter, which is a type of involuntary manslaughter. Other types of involuntary manslaughter include reckless behavior that results in someone's death and a death resulting from unlawful action. Voluntary manslaughter occurs when the unlawful killing was the result of adequate provocation, as occurred when Broke Bill assaulted Rosie. Provocation is said to be adequate if it would cause a reasonable person to lose self-control. This typically cannot be verbal, unless in the case of specific threats or in the elucidation of adultery. Murder is typically broken down into first and second degree. First degree, or premeditated murder, is necessary to be willful, premeditated, and deliberate, as in the case of Jason the Jerk. One of the biggest differences between different jurisdictions is how long premeditation is considered to be. Is it 5 minutes, an hour, a day, a week? That varies greatly. Second degree murder happens when the defendant has an intent to kill or cause grievous bodily harm that results in death, or knowing that it is likely to kill or cause grievous bodily harm that results in death. The primary difference between second degree murder and voluntary manslaughter is that voluntary manslaughter has adequate provocation. Second degree murder does not, as in the case when Rosie went and shot the man after her grammar was corrected. That is not adequate provocation. Finally, depraved heart murder is an action where the defendant acts with a depraved indifference to human life and where such an act results in a death. This obviously occurred when Rosie was speeding 90 miles per hour down the sidewalk, killing Archibald. And now you know the difference between these 6 types of killings. Let me know in the comments if the law is different where you live, in jurisdiction or country, and whether you would like to see more videos like this. This has been Epimetheus. Like, comment, and subscribe.
The year is 2001 and a young woman is returning home to her apartment with her hands full of
Okay, thoughts? We're gonna play again with microphone. Okay, thoughts on that, between, the differences between, let's talk about manslaughter first. The voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, did you guys capture that? The intent. Remember the mens rea is what comes into play. The actus rea is pretty obvious. We see what happened. We know the end result. But what was the intent? Then homicide, first degree, second degree. You notice the difference was premeditation. The guy that ruined her favorite TV show for her, she absolutely put some thought into this. Bought the gun, laying in wait, and then shot him. She had the opportunity. Perfect description of what a criminal homicide, murder in the first degree. Second degree, the linguist, there was no premeditation. She didn't think about killing him. It happened there, it happened on the spur of the moment. He angered her, rightfully so. She shot him. So never go around correcting people's grammar. That's the moral of the story. Okay, so you get the difference, right? Voluntary manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter. And in California, there are other degrees that come into play. But we're not gonna get into that. Just know what's going on the surface. And this video did a good job of doing that with a little humor. Rosie is a bad girl. Don't mess with her. Okay. So criminal homicide, serious crime. And I think I have a definition coming up, but it is the taking of a human life. Okay, so there's some criteria there. We really haven't talked a lot about elements yet, but the penal code breaks down every single criminal act into elements, and all the elements must be proven in court in order to fit the crime. Let's get this one. So common law exception, the actus reus requirement is an exception in cases where a defendant's felonious acts lead to an unintended death. Remember, again, focus on the actus reus, on the intent. Was the intent to cause harm to the degree that would result in the death? You have to keep that in the back of your mind. The felony murder doctrine holds felons culpable for resulting loss of life, even if unintended. Doesn't matter. I want to shoot and kill this person. I'm a terrible shot. And I end up shooting the person behind her. My intent was to cause harm, to take a life. Doesn't matter that I missed my intended target and killed an innocent bystander. In culpability, felons considered so wrong in their behavior that they assumed the risk and the responsibility for death. They knew what they were doing. That's so important, can't stress it enough. They knew exactly what they were doing, and then they went ahead and did it. Actus reus, mens rea, and concurrence. All three elements are there. You have a criminal homicide. Are all homicides criminal? Think about it. Are all homicides criminal? It's right there. Not always. Rosie took someone's life. The burglar, trying to get money for a bus, shot and killed him. She acted in self-defense, and of course the penal code goes in a little more detail. The threat had to be immediate, had to be substantial. You really have to, the person has to believe their life is in jeopardy. And then common law, 2 types of criminal homicide. And the video discussed it, murder, manslaughter. Okay, so let's break them down now, the different types of criminal homicide. justifiable homicide, excusable homicide, and then of course the criminal homicide. Justifiable occurs when the killing is permitted under law. Self-defense. Excusable homicides may involve some fault, but not enough to be considered a crime. It was an accident. These horror stories happen every year. Someone's in the kitchen cleaning a gun. Didn't know it was loaded. It goes off. Kills an innocent person. A child finds an unsecured firearm. Picks it up, thinks it's a toy. Ends up shooting and killing someone. It was an accident. It's excusable. Criminal homicides occur when a person is killed unlawfully with the criminal intent. The criminal intent is emphasized here. You have to have the intent in order to raise it to that level to be a criminal homicide. So let's go back to justifiable. The book says here, such as self-defense. What other acts could be considered justifiable? Don't make me call names. I will. Anybody? Just yell it out. What other manner can a death result in a justifiable homicide?
Self-defense or defense of somebody else.
Defense of somebody else. Good. Just use what's there. Self-defense, defense of others. Okay, that's a good one. What else? There's a couple more.
Defense of property?
Defense of property. That's big. Not so much in California, but if you go into the Midwest, they take their property serious. No, do not trespass. They will shoot you. Ask questions later. Thanks. Yeah, good. Anything else? There's a couple more I want to touch on. Think of an officer. Right? Law enforcement. In the course of their duty, discharging a firearm, taking a life, they still have to go through scrutiny of reviews from shooting panels. But it does happen. What about where I used to work? St. Quentin, death row. Executions, aren't those justifiable homicide? Still the taking of a human life. So keep those in mind as we move forward.
But isn't that sometimes self-defense?
I can hear you.
But isn't that sometimes self-defense?
Which one?
The execution, oh, you're talking about like the actual, never mind.
I know, you lost me on that one, Ashley.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're talking about the actual execution of the, okay, I'm thinking about somebody fighting in there.
No.
My bad, okay.
Gas chamber,
Okay.
lethal, you had something?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in the video, she had, when the first burglar was assaulted her and she killed him in self-defense, she wouldn't get in trouble for holding the firearm?
Most likely. In California, remember, this is really superficial explanation. Yeah, but in California, there's so many other factors gotta come into play. What was the threat? Was she just robbing you? Was that person armed? You gotta focus on what was the threat. And if it was just, they're bigger than you and they're demanding that you give them money, that's not gonna hold up in court. It really won't. Sad, not in California. So, good question. Does that kind of clarify?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. All right, types of criminal homicide. Model Penal Code, remember that serves as the example for all states to follow. Classifies criminal homicide 3 types: murder, manslaughter, negligent. Okay, manslaughter is less serious than murder. It occurs when killing is without malice aforethought. Remember I told you to emphasize on the intent previously? That's what separates the manslaughter. You really didn't intend to kill someone. It includes voluntary, which is killing done in the heat of passion. Involuntary manslaughter, which is killing that occurs as a result of recklessness. The person cleaning the firearm goes off, shoots and kills somebody, usually a family member. Involuntary manslaughter. So think about this. This happened when I was living up north. Husband and wife, younger couple, arguing. just arguing. They could hear them arguing with the neighbors and the whole thing. The husband goes out of the house, upset as can be, gets in the vehicle, I don't know if it's a car or truck, puts it in reverse, backs out, peeling out, just pissed off at the world. Didn't realize his child was behind the vehicle. Killed him. True story. Killed the kid. Involuntary manslaughter. Exactly. The court looked at the circumstances, brought the family in. They were so distraught over an argument. Cost them a child. The judge actually said, there's nothing I could do to punish this individual than they're already doing to themselves. Think about that. If you were the judge. I wasn't in the courtroom that day, but I did hear from other attorneys that that's what the judge said. His name was Atkinson. Judge Atkinson. There's nothing I can do to him that he isn't doing to himself. Wow. So think of manslaughter, things that happen that weren't really intended to happen, but cause serious injury, possibly death. Negligent homicide, considered variety involuntary, occurs when death results from the defense's criminal negligence. There's negligence, okay, just doing dumb things, negligent. It rises to the level of criminal when somebody loses a life. This happened up north, I don't know, Minnesota, somewhere where it gets really cold. And the sidewalks freeze over approaching the house. This person was hosting a party, had guests coming over, and they were waiting on a friend to show up. So I think they're watching a game of some sort. So they get together and say, hey, let's go wet the sidewalk down. Right, just wet it down, it'll be funny. Watch our buddy slip and fall on his behind. They thought it was hilarious. Well, it was, until his buddy slipped and fell, cracked his head and died. Not funny so much, no more, no. So yeah, they were charged. Specifically, the homeowner had the burden. And we're gonna talk about burden and duty in other chapters. But had the burden to provide a safe environment for his guests. Failed. Failed so bad that it wasn't just negligent that the sidewalk was slippery and iced down. It rose to the level of criminal because it was deliberate. Okay, criminal negligence. That's the point I'm trying to stress here. Questions on that one?
But isn't the sidewalk public property?
From the sidewalk to your home,
The
the
one
sidewalk
that
is,
the pedestrians walk on?
yeah,
Don't they consider
not the sidewalk where everybody walks.
that? Oh.
The part that comes to the house,
Okay.
the walkway that leads from the sidewalk to the home.
Oh, the driveway.
No, the driveway was parallel. Then there was a piece of grass, then this little path, and then more lawn on this side.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so it was from the sidewalk. Yeah, if the sidewalk was wet down, depends on who owns the sidewalk. It really does. Corpus delicti always raises a bunch of questions. What is it? What does it mean? Consists of death of a human being caused by a criminal act. Okay, that is the corpus delicti. Literally means the body of the crime. But a body is not required. Okay, so when they're saying the body of the crime, they're talking about the elements, okay, the facts, not a physical human body. So when you're looking at the corpus delicti, or you hear the term, they're talking about something that's written down, not a physical body. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt that a murder occurred is essential. Can someone be found guilty of murder? Think about this one. Found guilty of murder, but there's no victim. Is it Evan? Go ahead and say it.
I don't know exactly, it just feels like they could.
I would have called on you if you weren't right, as of, yeah, he's shaking his head, yeah. Yes, they can be. Much more difficult, but yes, they can be found guilty. Can a defendant be found guilty on evidence strictly circumstantial? Let's do this one again. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it does happen. They're weak cases, but if it's persuasive enough to convince a jury, yeah, it can happen. Body's not required, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the level of certainty in a criminal court. 12 jurors, 7 jurors, or a bench trial, whichever you prefer. It has to be unanimous in order to raise to that level of certainty, beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay, common law, modern statutes, illegal abortions. Here's some legal definitions that we're going to need to know to discuss the upcoming slides. At common law, the victim had to be born alive before a criminal homicide to occur. What hasn't come into question yet is birth. Now, that sounds ridiculous, but birth. Born alive, but the actual birth hasn't been addressed yet. It's coming. So does that mean that in order to be born alive, you have to have come from a womb? The way it's interpreted now is yes. But what about Dolly? Everybody who knows who Dolly is, right? The cloned sheep. What about a cloned human being? It's coming. If you kill a cloned human being, is that going to be a homicide? We don't know. We don't know. I'm just throwing it out there to stress that this has to be a human being, has to have been born in order to be a homicide, the taking of a human life. Some modern statutes define life to include a fetus. Some states do. The Constitution and the federal government leaves it to the states. Some states don't. And that's why we're talking about the abortion in our discussion for the next 2 weeks. And then illegal abortion. Some jurisdictions classify illegal abortions as a criminal homicide. And this information is always going to be an item of discussion, sometimes heated discussion. People really believe certain ways. If you're pro-abortion, you think women have the ultimate choice, it's their body, their choice, good for you. And I'm not going to try to convince you otherwise. If you believe that no, it goes against religion, fetus is a living thing, and if you abort a child, a fetus, you're aborting the child, you're committing murder. If that's what you believe, good for you. I'm not here to change anybody's beliefs. That's not my job. My job is to get you to think about where you stand on the issue, and then to research the opposing argument. That's what I want to see in these discussions, particularly this one. If you're adamant that abortion is murder, so you can't just tell me, well, that's what I believe. That's how I was raised. Okay. Give me more. I want to see more. I want to see some depth. Why do you believe that? Or if you believe the opposite. No, it's a woman's choice. And a fetus is, and you want to pull scientific facts, there's a lot of them out there, that says, no, a fetus is not really a living thing, that could be aborted up to the first trimester, whatever you want to say. But remember, do your research. This is one of those topics that you really need to cite your position. Okay? Not just, well, this is what I believe. That's a good start. Okay? But you got to do the research. Defining common death. Law versus, it just gave you all the information. We don't even know when birth happens. Okay? That's still being questioned. Here's another, we don't even know when you die. When are you dead? Legally dead. That's what we're going to talk about now. So in common law, death occurs when heartbeat, respiration cease. Right? Brain dead is another standard. Absence of physiological or electrical brain activity. Your brain waves aren't functioning anymore. But there's always going to be complexity. Brain death may occur even with continued respirations and pulse. And you could stop, your heart could stop beating, and your brain could still be active. You're going to want to know this when you start your discussion, when you look into your initial post. This will really help support your position either way. Mine, specific, I've read different journals that say life begins when the brain becomes active. When electrical impulses in the fetus You could measure activity. That is life. So death should be just the opposite, when that brain activity ceases. That's my position. Okay, but I want to hear what you guys think. So think about it. Looking forward to some good discussion. Uniform Determination of Death Act. Yeah, a lot of smart people got together. Very smart, think tank. Called themselves the Uniform Determination of Death. They try to analyze when death occurred. Irreversible collapses of respiratory, circulatory systems collapse and are irreversible. You can't kickstart them again. They're done. Brain function ceases completely, including the brain stem. There's no measurable activity. The controversy, the debate continues over still what constitutes brain dead. And many jurisdictions have adopted this standard. Okay, but what is it? What is it really telling you up here? Knowing this information, do you have a clear understanding of what death is? If you do, raise your hand and tell me. I don't know. I know what I believe, and I have other subject matter experts that agree with me. But this could be read either way, to support your position or argue against it. Do your best, do a lot of research, it'll drive you mad, then I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Time of death. The time death occurs in a criminal investigation is really important. It will determine if you're charging someone with a capital offense, murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree, manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter. This is what's going to make that determination. Proximate cause. Death must be the proximate result of the criminal act. If I shoot a person, but I only hit them in the shoulder, the likelihood of them dying from a shoulder wound is very minimal. But when I did that, they stumbled and they fell into a river. They don't know how to swim and they drowned. My intent was just to shoot the person, to injure them, but not to kill them. Them falling into the river and drowning, is that my fault? Yeah, it is. Proximate cause. Had I not shot this person in the arm, they'd still be alive today. The really good example on this one, thief goes into a liquor store, not armed, okay, they don't have a firearm. They approach the clerk, put their hand in their jacket pocket and use a finger gun, the old finger gun, and they tell the clerk, give me all the money in your register or I'll shoot you. The clerk thinks this guy's gonna shoot him. Does this. Heart attack. Killed over and died. The guy with the finger gun standing there going, oh shit, what did I just do? Is he guilty of murder? Yeah, that's what we're talking about, proximate cause. Had he not used this finger gun in such a lethal manner, the clerk would still be alive.
I forget the legal term, but I read this a while ago. It basically meant that you take your victim as you get them.
Elaborate on that?
It's like if you do something, like the river example, when you shoot them and then since they can't swim in the river, not take your victim as they get, even if you did not intend for them to die, that's what happens. You're still responsible for that.
Exactly. But now let's talk about that. Is that murder? First degree, second degree, or is it manslaughter? Remember the intent. Did he intend for this clerk to die of a heart attack? There was no intent there. His intent was to rob him. That's going to be a tough one to prove for murder, first degree. At best, they'll get him on manslaughter, maybe second degree. That's how these things break down. Statutory limits. You gotta know what that means, right? Statutory limits. The state has a specific time frame. that falls under due process. They can't keep you hanging for the rest of your life, waiting to take you to trial. Now, so we know what the statutory requirement is. But you gotta know this, it starts when the arrest is made. That's when the clock starts ticking. I've been a part of a few investigations that we didn't have all the evidence yet. So we discussed it and said, no, we can't make an arrest yet. It's still an ongoing investigation. We finish the investigation, or we get close enough that we know with a certain amount of certainty that, yeah, this is our guy. Then you go in and make an arrest. Because that's when the clock starts ticking. Most crimes, you have about a year. We're gonna talk about a year in a row. There's actually something called a year in a row. But most crimes, you have a year to take action against a defendant, because you do not want to keep this person in suspense for that long. And it shouldn't take that long. The right to a speedy trial, the right to confront your accusers, okay? So all that has to kick in under statutory. But what if we make the arrest? They post bail, and while they're out on bail, they flee the country. They come back 5 years later thinking, hey, statutory limit's over. Can't do nothing to me. Is that true? Statutory limits can start, they can be suspended, and then they can restart in that case. And the reason I say that reminded me of a guy that actually was killed in San Quentin. He was an inmate, committed murder, and while he was waiting trial, fled the country. I think he was in Cuba or Mexico or something like that. And he was there for quite a while. But he got homesick, decided to come home. Comes back to the States, and someone in his own family called the cops, told him, hey, the guy you're looking for, he's back. Yeah, so they went and got him. He didn't put up much resistance. I met this guy in San Quentin. And so anyway, they proceeded with the criminal trial, found guilty, sentenced, not to death, just life without, and he was sent to San Quentin. Now, I'm a sergeant working East Block. It's a housing unit in San Quentin. And I have a brand new cop sitting in one of my towers over here that overlook the yard where the inmates go out to recreate. This person went out to the yard, and he was playing, they're having fun, recess, with other inmates. He gets into a fight. And they're punching each other out. The gunman, who had just out of the academy, maybe 6 months, orders them to stop. They don't. So the officer said he took aim and shot. He was looking for center mass, the back of the guy that was assailing the one who just come back into the country. Just as he's pulling the trigger, they must have moved a certain way, because as they moved, he ended up shooting the guy that was getting the heck beat out of him and caught him right behind the ear. And he shot with a glazer round. Anybody knows what a glazer round is? It explodes on impact. It's a 9mm, it's got a bunch of little BBs in it, so it doesn't ricochet and hurt other people. That was the thought. Caught him behind the ear, just, you couldn't even identify this guy. It was pretty bad shape. So the question was, did the officer shoot? Was it justified? Yeah, he was clear, but he never came back to work. He just couldn't handle it. I don't blame him. Statutory limits on this particular, he should have just stood away. He ended up coming back, and he wasn't a bad, I know this sounds ridiculous, he wasn't a bad guy. Yeah, he made a mistake, he killed somebody, but he wasn't a bad guy, like a serial killer or one of these other idiots you see. And it ended up costing him his life. So statutory limits start at the point of arrest, can be suspended, and then they can kick in again under those types of conditions. Special requirement. Here it is, the year and a day rule. So what does that mean? Death must occur within a year and a day of the fatal act for homicide, for criminal homicide. So if I shoot this person in the chest, but they don't die, remember, when did the officers charge me? That's something to consider. Year in a row, the day the fatal act occurred. So this one doesn't even care about when I was charged with a crime. They care about the day that the act occurred. So let's just say it happened January 1, 2024. Boom. They're in intensive care, but they're still alive. Doc Stallion, they're probably not gonna make it much longer. So you as the investigator just waiting. Okay, let me know when he dies. Let me know when he dies. We're in December and this guy's still hanging on. Doesn't die. January, a full year went by. We just lost our first-degree murder. Still charged with another crime, but not first-degree murder. Okay, the rationale based on the belief, proof of causation becomes more difficult. Witnesses' memories fade. Officers' memories fade. No matter how well you document it, you're still kind of vague. And the court thinks that because this is such a serious criminal proceeding, they don't want memories to be that faded, that eroded. They want it still fresh. Aims to prevent potentially unjustified prosecutions and convictions. Many jurisdictions have abolished or modified the year and a day rule. It's not right. Just because a person didn't die within a year and a day, now you can't charge the defendant with first-degree murder. Anyway, but that's what the rule says. Okay, proximate cause. We talked about the intent. Did I intend to cause this person harm? Yes, but I missed and I caused that person harm. Death must be the direct or proximate result of the criminal act. Type of act, let's see, can be an overt act, an act of omission. I haven't talked about omission, or criminal negligence. And the result must be foreseeable at the time of the act. And the precise harm does not need to have been anticipated. There's a few cases that I studied a long time ago. Had to do with this goes back. I mean, way back. This case comes from Old England. It was like in the 1800s. Neighbors were feuding, but that case is still researched and used in criminal defenses. The neighbors were feuding. One of them liked to shoot a bow and arrow, and they were and this was a long time ago, right? And they were practicing against the fence, and they were shooting their bow and arrow. One of the arrows carried over, shot, and killed the neighbor's son. Proximate cause. Was there any intent to shoot and kill the neighbor's son? No. Should the person have known, here's where the reasonable, foreseeable part comes in, that shooting a bow and arrow against a fence, that if you miss, could hurt somebody on the other side of the fence. This is where the juries come in. Think about that. If you're a juror, would you think that somebody shooting a bow and arrow here should have considered they could hurt somebody on the other side? Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the case kind of solidified the reasonable foreseeability of an act. Driving on a sidewalk like Rosie in the video. If you drive on the sidewalk, don't you think you might hurt somebody? There's a possibility there. Yeah, the potential's pretty high. So you need to think that you could harm someone. Now here's where it lacks the mens rea. There is no criminal intent. You didn't intend to hurt the person on the sidewalk or the person on the other side of the fence. But you should have reasonably known. Okay, quickly, I want to just cover the act of omission. What does that mean? Because omission is going to boil over into duty. Act of omission. What does it mean? The just act of omission. Somebody give me what does it mean? Nobody. Is Brianna here? Brianna? You're Brianna. Oh, good. What do you think? Just the term act of omission. What do you think that means? Not a clue? Wait. Yeah, just act of omission.
It's a lack of action when it's expected to be.
Okay, good. Lack of action, what it's expected to be.
Withholding information.
I'm sorry.
Withholding information.
Withholding, yeah, okay, could be information. I think Wade came closest. You failed to act. You failed to do something you were supposed to do. lack of omission, right? Now, who would actually be culpable of not acting? Somebody who has that responsibility. Law enforcement. A law enforcement officer is a sworn peace officer, paid to uphold the law. There's an expectation there, right? You're at a party or you're at the county fair, having a good time. You're with your family, and over here's a couple of drunk jerks. They're cussing loud in front of your children. You tell them, hey guys, keep it down, I got my kids with me, then they turn on you. You look, and over there's an officer watching the whole thing. What's going through your mind?
You gonna do something? You gonna do something?
Thank you. Are you watching this? Right? Aren't you going to do something? Aren't you going to intervene? Why should he intervene?
Because he has the duty.
That's his job, right? He has a responsibility to do so. Now, let's just say the same circumstance, but instead of an officer, just Joe Blow. Is there the same level of responsibility from Joe Blow as you would expect from an officer? No. Okay, so we're talking about acts of omission. That's what we're mainly focusing on. Someone that has a duty to act in specific situations, such as this one. Firefighters, right? Firefighters are another, paramedics, nurses, yeah, medical staff. There's an expectation. There's a traffic accident. Victims are laid out. You're there. You look around and say, is anybody a doctor? Anybody medical? And you hope to God somebody is. Yeah, I'm a RN, let me help. So the RN gets in there, does the best work she can do. Unfortunately, one of those people died, and the family now is so angry, they blame it on the nurse. Well, it was her fault. They actually take her to court. Is she liable, that nurse, the Good Samaritan?
No.
That falls under Good Samaritan law. As long as they acted in good consciousness, tried to do their best, to the best of their abilities. No, Good Samaritan. Okay, so good. Reasonable foreseeability, proximate causes. I hope I'm leaving you guys with a little bit of understanding in that regard. If there's some confusion, ask now. Because next week we're going to jump into more homicides. Yeah, we're going to stop right here.
Yes, can you
Yeah.
tell me what the difference between first degree and second degree again?
It's the level of intent. It all comes down to intent. Did you lay in wait? Did you believe the harm you intended to cause was the end result? So you intended to shoot and kill this person. You went and bought the gun like Rosie did, and when you seen him, you opened up shot him 5-6 times. There was no doubt what you were thinking, right? That's first degree murder.
So what about capital murder timing?
That's different. Special circumstance.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question, yeah. But when you're talking about capital cases, that's special circumstance. More than one murder, or the level of deviance in the act. They mutilated the body. Or it was a child. Yeah, I know. Sorry. There's some really sick people out there, I tell you guys. Good questions though. You're getting the hang of it. You understand what we're talking about. So please, I want to leave you thinking about the discussion. The death. Keep in mind, when does birth actually happen? And when does death really occur? Work that into your discussion to support whatever your positions are. And I ask you, please, when you're responding to your peers, stay on point. Argue the facts, don't attack the person. Okay? I've only seen it a couple times when a student actually said to another student, you must be stupid if that's what you think. What does that contribute to the discussion? It really doesn't. Okay, so please keep that in mind. Keep it professional. Keep the debate focused on point. argue what we're talking about, don't attack the person. Questions? No questions? Okay, I got a couple people I wanna see if you're here. So sit tight just for a second. Maybe Johnson, if you came in late. Evan Rivera, if you're here, please stay back. And that's all I got. If you came in late, see me, so I make sure I give you credit for being here. Okay, thank you guys.